It's time for Tycoons of Small Biz, spotlighting the true backbone of the American economy, the true tycoons of business in America, the owners, founders, and CEOs of small businesses. The show's hosts, Austin Peterson and Landon Mance, are registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation, a broker-dealer, member SIPC, and registered investment advisor. The views expressed by your hosts, Austin and Landon, are not necessarily the views of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Backbone Planning Partners is a marketing name for registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Now let's lean in as Austin and Landon connect with this week's Tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I'm your host here, as always, Austin Peterson, coming to you live from our studio here in Tempe, Arizona, the Business Radio X studios. I'm joined by my co-host today, Ryan Weissmuller of Intrepid Solutions, and then we also have Jason Richardson, founder of Bad Birdie. So we're going to get to that in just a second. If this is the first time that you're listening to our program and you're wondering what it is that we do here at Tycoons of Small Biz, we are today recording our 103rd episode of this fledgling podcast, and we're very proud of that. And it's a podcast that's put together by small business owners for small business owners. We believe that the small business owner in our country is truly the backbone of the American economy, and we wanted to give them a platform and an opportunity to share their story, share experiences, share advice with other business owners who obviously can benefit from that advice. So with that being said today, like I mentioned, I've got Jason Richardson, founder of Bad Birdie, on the show with us today. Jason, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited to learn about this. So I have to start by saying I think Bad Birdie is an awesome name. I played golf yesterday. Obviously, my golf apparel, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell Jason's golf apparel is way cooler than mine is. I do have some decent golf joggers on and multicolored Vans. So I did my best with what I have in my wardrobe to try to compete with you today. But Jason, before we jump into the business side of things, tell us about you personally. Where'd you grow up? Do you have a family, kids?
Yeah. So I grew up in Scottsdale here, a little bit north of here, Scottsdale, Arizona, from like 2 years old till college. And then I went to school at Azusa Pacific University. It's a small school outside LA. And while I was out there, worked in advertising and commercial production for about 10 years before I started Bad Birdie. Met my wife out there. We just had our first daughter last summer. So we have a 10-month-old daughter named Ivy. So yeah, that's kind of my personal life. Live in Central Phoenix. Love playing golf. Love working out. Love going to spending an afternoon happy hour with friends and family at a restaurant in town. And yeah.
Awesome. So 10-month-old Ivy, you said is her
Ivy,
name?
yeah.
It's so you're to the point where you're getting a full night's sleep now.
Oh yeah, she's like a dream baby. Yeah, she slept I think like three months through.
Oh, good.
So we got lucky.
Yeah, I was lucky with both of my kids. My kids are 22 and 19 now, but both of them were good sleepers right from the get-go.
Yeah.
But one of our other co-hosts and my business partner, Landon, has 2-year-old twins, and they were preemies, and they did not sleep well for quite some time.
That's got to be wild.
Yeah.
I'm super thankful. I know we want to have more kids, so I'm sure we're going to get the second one to be a little, something.
Yeah, it could be. So tell us more about Bad Birdie. I mean, what was it that made you start that? Where did the name come from?
Yeah. So we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary last week. So I started in my apartment 5 years ago. But kind of the backstory about it is I started playing a lot more golf in my mid to late 20s. Love the sport. Growing up in Scottsdale, you grew around a certain type of golf culture and stigma. I think a lot of the golf that I knew was very exclusive. It was about country clubs. You had to look a certain way, dress a certain way. And I actually was playing golf in LA at a local muni course, and it was a completely different type of golf. Like you didn't have to wear a certain polo. You didn't have to have a certain dress code. And so I think when I got invited to go play at a tournament, I had to go out and actually buy a polo for it because I'm like, this is a nicer course. I need to have something that looks cool. And I like wearing bold prints or kind of something I'd say a little bit more fashion forward or trendy or something along those lines. And went to a local golf store and walked out with a Nike red Tiger polo, which is great because I love Tiger, but it wasn't super like align with like kind of who I was. And I think kind of spurred this idea of starting a business to target a very niche market, which is, guys in their, 25 to 40 that want to have a focus on the fun side of golf versus necessarily this like stigma or culture that's been around it. And I think alongside that, I'd also started to follow more people on Instagram or YouTube, and there started to be this whole trend of people kind of redefining what golf culture is. There's still something, the tradition of golf is great. There's all these things like country clubs are great, right? But there's like a new younger generation that was kind of like reshaping it and rethinking about it. So ultimately, had that idea around Thanksgiving, and was kind of had it in my drive back from Thanksgiving here to LA, 6 hours in the car, and I was just thinking, man, there's got to be someone that's already doing this, right? Making a fun golf polo, and went Googled online and no one was doing it, and I was kind of shocked. So over the next 5 months, figured out how to make golf polos. Had no apparel background. Really came kind of like a hustler mentality where I was in LA. So first place I went is like the Garment District downtown. And, I was walking into doors being like, hey, do you guys sell, can I make a polo with you? And they're like, no, we're not a factory. Like we just sell fabrics, and we're not really actually like a B2B store. So ended up lots of visiting, showing up to random factories, trying to figure it out. And ultimately after a couple months found a way to make 100 polos. I put about $20,000 on my own money, and during that time had no business plan. I still have never had a business. We have business plans now, but like at least to get it going the first couple of years, it was just kind of like fake it till you make it. And so, we ultimately launched by me. I ultimately launched with I think 8 designs, 100 polos, and it was in my apartment room. Like all the warehouse, right? I'm putting parentheses up, was just in my apartment, and built a Shopify site, did a photo shoot, and launched it. And the first couple of weeks, it was just my mom and friends buying polos. It wasn't anyone that was actually like that was a random person. So that's kind of the initial part. I'll stop there. See if you guys have any more questions on it. I could keep rambling on the story.
No, I mean, I'll make a comment. I'm sure Ryan will weigh in here in just a second. But, you said fake it till you make it, right? And the reality is most entrepreneurs have to do that in the beginning. There literally is that fake it till you make it. I am glad that you followed that up with, we do have business plans now, right? Because Ryan would be giving you the stare of death if you didn't have a business plan today.
Yeah. So what was that point? Obviously the trajectory was fast.
Yeah.
Where was it that you looked back and this no longer became a side gig? I mean, was there a seminal moment? Was there an affirmation that all of a sudden, okay, this is no longer a side gig, this is a business, and I'm going to pivot and go at this full time? Because like you said, you didn't have this big apparel background that you were relying upon to try to build this big company.
Yeah, so I think the story of like launching it to actually becoming a business, I think the first year and a half, I still was doing another full-time job, but I worked freelance, so I could pick and choose jobs. And so I slowly started to see, we're selling more. I can maybe I'll take one less job and I can invest a little bit more and see what happens in the business. And we sold 200 polos that month instead of 100, right? So I kind of started, I had the privilege of being able to like scale back my full-time job and move into investing in the company, which was not a lot of people have that. I mean, I still worked nights, weekends, whatever, early mornings to get everything done. But I think there was a pivotal moment where I got a friend of a friend introduced me to some guys that were, wealth advisors for entrepreneurs. And so all of their clients that they worked with were guys who had grown businesses from nothing into something and then ultimately had sold it or run it. And they were like, yeah, we love meeting young entrepreneurs. Like, tell us about your business, and no really agenda. But they're like, oh yeah, when you can become an multiple $1 million business. And I was like, wait a second, like I never thought that. Like my mindset was like, I'm trying to make $3,000 to $4,000 a month to supplement a mortgage in LA. Like that was the whole goal, and it was supposed to be. I read a lot of Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week. It was supposed to be automated, but it was like, wait, these guys who see this all the time, they just asked me that one question, like, how long do you think it'll take you to get to hit this revenue number? And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a possibility. So that kind of shifted, kind of a culmination of started investing more, ended up getting married, and to my wife, Jenna, who, kind of fun story is like we started dating the month before I actually had the idea for this. So she's been along the whole journey with me, which has been awesome. And part of that is, ended up, we were living in LA in a small apartment, and we're like, hey, I asked her, hey, can we just live on your salary and go all in on this business? And she said, yeah. So we put everything we had on the line, got loans to finance the, like small loans. I'm talking like tens of thousands of dollars to like finance inventory and go all in. And it was like, worst case, we lose it and we have each other. And so a little bit of a romantic story, but it worked out. And so that kind of was like, all right, let's test that. If that worked, great, then we could keep reinvesting. And so we just have had this model of like, let's grow, set a goal. We're going to leverage a little bit of debt to grow the inventory. And then we hit that and then it sells through. And we've always very, fortunate that we've always actually sold out, and we've always had to be scrambling to try to figure out how to grow. And so, yeah, it's just been kind of slow and steady steps every single day, and more of like a long-term chip away versus like making big moves and putting everything like, I don't know if that answers the question but.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it answered what you were trying to get from her.
No, it does. And I think it's interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about the growth you've seen over the last couple of years as we go on. But I think it is, again, just knowing for so many, there's the misconception about the entrepreneurial business. Even in your case, I mean, it wasn't an overnight success.
No,
I mean, this was a build. This was something that took time. You're literally, going all in. And I think that's a good lesson for so many entrepreneurs out there. Every journey is unique, but I love the point you make about the slow and steady, because it is easy when you start to get that traction, get some affirmation. Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing you were tempted to maybe go all in at times, maybe a little faster, or wow, we could really swing big, and all of a sudden, I've gotten a sale that came out of nowhere. I mean, were you fighting that tug of maybe? I mean, you clearly had the willpower to hold back those reins, but it had to be challenging at some times, right?
Yeah, and I think there is the truth to entrepreneurism. We have a different business model. We're a bootstrap business. We don't, we haven't gone out and raised a ton of money and kind of followed that. And there's different types of it, but everyone always thinks that like, oh, you're running a really successful business. Like you must be like playing golf every day and driving sports cars and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, no, you have I actually have none of that. And I actually play less golf than I ever thought I could. And so a lot of times when you do have success, people are just seeing the tail end and they don't see all of the, hours and blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. And I think I think most entrepreneurs have that story, right? Like no one set out to build huge, necessarily like I'm not doing this to like drive fancy sports cars and play a lot of golf. I love being an entrepreneur and I love business and I think what we have a chance to do in the golf space. And I think just making slow little, moves every single day over 5 years. That's how we got to where we were versus like, I don't know. I so many times where I was like, let's go like try to raise millions of dollars and blow this thing out of the water. But I'm like, why? Like, why don't we just keep slow and steady, stay the course a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's unique. I don't know how old you are, Jason, but
34.
Okay. So on the higher end, I guess, maybe of the millennial type of generation, right? But new founders today, specifically over the last decade, are always looking for that. Can I raise money yet? Right, and they want to blow it up quickly, and I think that it's a lost art to build a business slow and steady and build it the way that most businesses in this country were built to begin with. So I first of all, I take my hat off to you for realizing that and recognizing that that's an okay way to build a business, and actually a really great way. The other comment that I would make is from the outside looking in, there's so many people in every aspect, right? Whether it's the music industry, actors, comedians, whatever, where everybody from the outside says, oh, they were an overnight success, right? But they don't know the hours and years and all of that went into them getting to where they are today. And that's the same thing with business owners, is people don't realize how much blood, sweat, and tears go into building a business. Literally blood, sweat, and tears. Your wife, so I have to circle back to Jenna, right? You mentioned she was there from the beginning. I want to know what her background is and how she grew up to give her that ability to be that supportive from the get-go, right? And I'll lay the groundwork for you a little bit before you go into that. My wife has been with me from the beginning of my business, and we're a little over 20 years now, and we've been married for 24 years. 24 years this August, it'll be 24 years. And but she grew up in a family where her dad had a 9-to-5 job, very steady job, worked for a large organization, retired with a pension. He's literally been retired longer than he worked for the organization, right? Because he just turned 93 this year. And so my wife's viewpoint and understanding of things was very different than mine. My dad was an entrepreneur. We never had a whole lot of money. her life was very, very steady. So I want to know about Jenna's life and kind of what that's been like to get
Yeah.
here.
So you mentioned family. So Jenna's family, grew up with a dad who worked at the same company for a long time, retired with a pension, very hard worker, but very stayed the course long term, grew up in the Midwest. My parents grew up in the Midwest, but moved out here. My dad was actually an entrepreneur, had a business out here in Arizona in thermoform packaging. I won't go too much into that. But yeah, so Jenna, she was a therapist. She's a marriage and family therapist, very much on the emotional intelligence side. Like, I'm very analytical. She's like the complete opposite. So I think when we work together, she's great. And yeah, I think she's always just believed in me. And I think she's the one that challenges me to be like, hey, like, even there was a conversation beginning of this year. I was like, man, dude, like, this is a big risk if we're going to do this. She's like, well, why not? Like, we got to go for it. And so I think she's always been, Jenna's also someone too, like, she doesn't care what the success comes from it. She doesn't care about the money that may come from it. She just is like, hey, are you pursuing your dreams? And end of the day, like, as long as we have each other and you're like living a happy, healthy life, like, that's all that we need. And I think she's very, she's the one that would keep me in tune. Like, I think a lot of people, when you have a growing business, there's certain things that you can do to make you feel like, oh, I bought this fancy thing, or I'm a part of this exclusive club. I think she's always been the one to challenge me to be like, what does that actually really even give you? Like, I think we're going to find value in life. And for us, it's in our faith, it's in our family and our friends. So she's kind of been my, grounder for that.
Yeah. She's been that balancing factor.
Yeah. She balances me out. Yeah.
That all entrepreneurs need, right?
Yeah.
So you've experienced some rapid growth the last couple of years. You've also got a 10-month-old daughter.
Yeah.
How has that balance worked for you in navigating and being able to hold on? You're not getting sleep. You're obviously a very involved father, and you're trying to hold on to the reins on a business that's really taking off.
Yeah. So I think, with raising our daughter, it's a whole new thing that I'm learning how to do and get better at. I think when I got married to Jenna, there was a point where I had to recalibrate as a husband. It was a different thing to be a fiance, or a different thing to be a boyfriend, right? Like, when you're running a business, like, you still kind of have like some freedom that, like, of your time in a different way. But when you're married, you're like, okay, we're going to do life together. It probably took me like 3 to 4 months to kind of recalibrate and learn how to be a husband and an entrepreneur and run a business. I'm going through the same thing now with Ivy. I think in the last, the first couple of months, you're just kind of running around with your head off. I think I've been able to calibrate a little bit more around like, okay, how do I prioritize time with family? And I think it's like, I just have to give myself grace to be like, okay, I'm figuring it out. And then I think Jenna's a huge support. She, is with Ivy every day during the day and helping raise her, and hopefully more of our family as we have more if we can. So yeah.
Awesome. So tell us what the business looks like today. I mean, you can share revenue numbers if you want. You don't have to, but how many employees are there? What are you doing from a sourcing and a warehousing standpoint?
Yeah, so I think I can, employees, we are 17 people right now. I think a year ago at this time, we had about 5 or 6. I think we signed our first lease for an office like May 20th of last year. So we're coming up on that. We're almost already outgrowing it, which is exciting. So we've been very slow to hire and like make sure we're running a cash flow positive business to hire those people. I've always been like, take on more till you're kind of bursting at the seams and then hire. In terms of revenue, last year was our first year we broke into 8 figures in revenue. And then, we're trying to grow at, 70 to 80% growth year over year, at least for this year. And so we're on track to do that, which is awesome. And our business is, we're between, I would say, average 70% e-commerce business. So we're on that D2C model where we are, driving, it's the whole e-commerce sales funnel where we're driving revenue through ads and different things like connected TV and podcasts and whatever else, direct mail. And then we kind of have this whole funnel where we get people in. And, to me, I'm very much like we have to create a great product and also a great brand and then have a great customer experience through that. We also sell about 30% of our businesses into wholesale. We have over 1,000 accounts nationwide that are selling into pro shops, that are small accounts, ordering anywhere from, $3 to $100,000 a year. But like a lot of the small shops are ordering polos and then they have, members coming in and buying them. And then we also sell to a lot of the main retailers. We sell to Nordstrom, PJ Superstore, Scheels, Dick's Sporting Goods, Golf Town in Canada, a couple Dillards, Von Maur. So yeah, we're just at the beginning of all this. Like, we're learning up and growing up as a team. I think, 2 years ago we had maybe 50 accounts and now we have over 1,000. And I think it's a really cool thing to be a part of and see. But, we love our retail partners and they give us a different, credibility. They show us that, we get a different type of shopper. So that's it from revenue, sales breakdown. All of our manufacturing is done overseas. We started out in LA and we did everything like I was making polos. Like I was like losing money on basically to ship a polo and making everything. We like weren't making any money the first year, but eventually kind of got to a little bit of scale in LA. But ultimately, there's actually better facilities in sewing and manufacturing overseas. So currently we have a great partner in South Korea that does all of our tops. And then we're also out of China for headwear and other accessories. But we're going to probably be expanding into South America and different areas as the business continues to grow. We do all of our fulfillment with a third-party logistics company out of Los Angeles. For the first 3 years, we did everything in-house, but as we grew, the order volume, has gone up. There's a lot of technology to sustain that, so we found a great partner out there we do that with. And then, I'm trying to think of anything else. I can answer anything.
I'm curious, and you touched on this a little bit. I mean, you're clearly a disruptive product in a space that's steeped in tradition. So you talked about that there wasn't anything out there like you when you first broke into it, but tell us a little bit more. What was that experience like? I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of doors just slammed in your face just because of that tradition. You've now gotten this traction, and you're, like you mentioned, some of the stores, you're sitting alongside even some of these brands that have been around forever that our grandfathers wore. Yeah. What was that like? What were some of the challenges you ran into, and how have you managed that?
Yeah, I think we were the first mover. So I remember in the space, I don't know who it was. It was some fashion editor at like Golf Digest or someone that was high up, and they kind of like turned their nose up to us to be like, oh, you're just some, young brand trying to think you're going to change everything. Right. But I think it really comes to, I think what the market has shown us, and what the market has shown us is that there is a young generation of golfers who want to focus on the fun side of the game, and we are just creating products to support that and support what they're already doing. And so really, like, I think from a challenge perspective, we've faced a lot of challenges on like growing up in logistics and supply chain and understanding how to scale. But in terms of what the market wants, I think we're really just filling a need in a sense of like, people weren't already doing this. And so we were coming in being like, hey, we're this fun brand. We're going to focus on having fun versus, making sure your swing speed is quicker. We're going to focus on, playing music on the course versus like, the walk the course mentality, which like, not that that's a bad thing, but there's a huge segment of golf products that are tied to like only walking the course, purest golf movement. And I love walking the course when I play golf, but we just, as a brand, position ourselves and take the slice of the pie. That's like, we're just out there to focus on the fun side and really the community and the camaraderie that happens on the golf course. So, yeah,
I think it's so. Last week or the week before, our guest had actually started a golf fitness website way back, like 2001. He was doing video marketing, which was just insane. I'm sure you guys are doing a bunch of video marketing today, but one of the things that really helped him grow his business, which was kind of lucky for him, was that Tiger Woods burst onto the scene. 1997, I think he won his first Masters, and he was really the first golfer that was physically fit, right? Like, it wasn't that everybody was overweight as a golfer, but he was the first one that was, you could see six-pack abs through his polo, and he had the big, forearms and big biceps, that sort of thing. And so that kind of helped his brand, right? So with you, I think, okay, there are some young golfers on the scene. I think of Ricky Fowler, right? He's known for wearing loud colors and being different than everybody else. So would you say that helps? The younger golfers that are on scene today that really are golfing today because of Tiger Woods, right? Yep. Are they helping you to be able to drive this message for you?
Yeah, 100%. I think we're actually just seeing the tip of the iceberg on that stuff. I think we're going to see more and more golfers starting to come in and have, more of that younger personality. I think a lot of these guys do have that personality, but golf is... So where am I going with this? I think you're going to see it more. I think from a product standpoint, when you see it on TV, like we're going to eventually get to a spot where we can sponsor players and actually make that connection like Ricky Fowler was able to do. And I think also too, like there's just a young group of these golfers. Like it's like people are starting to show more personality and things like that. And even like there's a Netflix documentary coming around. It's same as the Formula One producers. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but Formula One has grown a lot over the last couple of years because of this. So now the PGA Tour is going to have a documentary episode series on Netflix about players behind the scenes and see what these guys are like and showing their personalities. I think, even the PGA Tour has some sort of measuring system where if you have more social followers, you can get some sort of bonus structure for players. So it allows, I think even the tour is realizing that there is a new generation, and so they're trying to incentivize players. And I think it really just comes to how do you show personalities? I think golf in a competitive state is so, it's such a mind game. And so I think you end up seeing, as anyone, everyone's really focused, but I think off the course and stuff like that, these guys are just normal dudes, fun guys. A lot of our, team has hung out with some of these golfers and, non-Bad Birdie situations, and they're just one of the boys in a sense. So yeah. I think we're going to see a big change in the next, I bet in 10 years from now, I think what they look like, how golf is portrayed, I think the game's going to stay the same, but I think the culture is going to just keep more evolving in the same way you see what basketball players wear, their shoes and the swagger they have, even baseball players, the jewelry they wear, some of this stuff. I think we're just going to see a little bit more freedom to show your personality in golf.
Yeah, no, I think
Hopefully.
I think it's a good thing. I really do. I think it has had this exclusive nature for decades, right?
Yeah.
I grew up, I mentioned, pretty poor. I picked up a golf club for the first time when I was 23 years old. And, my son, conversely, who grew up very differently than I grew up, picked up a golf club when he was 8, right? Played all through high school, plays today still, he's probably 7, 8, 10 handicap, decent golfer, but he loves the game of golf. But there is still that exclusive nature to where people feel like you have to be upper level income-wise to even participate in the sport, or that it has to be stodgy older men wearing very basic clothing. So I hope that it does, and I think it will just expand the sport overall.
Yeah, and I think there's so many, all the new golf companies that are coming out, all the new kind of next generation, it's all about that. And I mean, I always say, there's still certain circumstances playing a new country club or getting invited to play golf in a certain situation. It's there is still this oh man, am I dressing? Am I doing the right thing? And I'm if we can move away from exclusivity and just being inclusive and being hey, just come as you are, I think that will make the game. It'll just grow the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, why do you need to be wearing a collared shirt to play golf? Right. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot. I mean, you can already see some of Nike, Adidas, some of these big players. They're kind of toying with different things there. Right. And it's how do we respect the game, right? But how do we never want to disrespect it, but how do we make it more fun? And how do we just let people be themselves? And sometimes you want to wear a collared shirt, sometimes you don't, tuck it in, tuck it out.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak for Ryan, and then I'm going to let him jump in with what he's about to ask. But I would ask that you expand from 25 to 50 instead of 25 to 40 so that Ryan and I are included in that.
I own it already, so I feel included. Whether I am or not, I'm wearing it. So,
I mean, any business, I think we have to, at least now we focus on it. But yeah, we have, one of my favorite things is seeing, I would say, customers outside of our target demographic, seeing a young kid at 10 years old wearing a Bad Birdie, or seeing, a guy that's 75 retiree on the golf course, just having fun. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was going to ask, just you've had this disruption, you've gotten to a point, you've talked about all these channels and kind of the fast growth you've had there, but where 5 years from now, where do you think this goes? You've talked about this trend in the game, what do you see as the future, I guess in a broad sense, in the niche that you're in, but then specifically for Bad Birdie?
It's a great question. I ask myself all the time. I think simply put, I look at it from, how do we expand our product, and how do we expand the stories that we're telling about our product and golf in general? And so I think from a product level, right now we are, a polo, primarily known for our polos, right? So as we evolve, how do we become known for more than just our polos? How do we expand into being more than just a bold print golf polo, brand? We have hats. How do we grow our hat business? How do we grow different types of tops, right? Different types of bottoms. How do we expand and start making and drawing lines to okay, well, what's the Bad Birdie guy wearing before he goes to the course? What's he wearing after the course? What's he wearing to work during the day? If maybe wearing a Bad Birdie is maybe a little bit too bold, and starting to ask those questions. Then we also have to ask, what other markets in golf are growing? Is women's growing? Is kids growing? How can we start making more connections and making the game more fun and inclusive? And it's, we have to stay focused, right? We've only been able to grow the business off of polos right now, but I think that allows us to be able to test more channels. So, one of my favorite things is working with our product team to think about and dream, what kind of new things can we be, expanding in? And I'm wearing one now. We're launching Cabana sets this summer. It's a button-down shirt with matching shorts that I can wear on the course. I can go directly to a pool party in the summer. I can also go on a date with Jenna in this. I can also show up, whatever the occasion is, but it's kind of the line between being on course and off course starts getting a little bit more blurry, and that's where I think we can win. And I'm really excited to start expanding into there. I also think too, outside of product, like we have endless opportunities to be creative as a brand and just start thinking about, look at brands like Patagonia, Yeti, Red Bull, Media House. Like these brands just like go above and beyond and create cool experiences, content, things to entertain people. And I think if we can do that, I'm just super excited, whether it's digitally or in person. I feel like we have endless ideas and thoughts at the office. It's just a matter of like, when's the right time to execute it? How do we get the budget to be able to support it? And yeah, I think we'll always be, e-commerce. I think our wholesale business will grow. We have our first retail store in Kierland up in Scottsdale. And I think, I see in 5 years, at least 5 to 10 retail stores. I think there's a huge opportunity, especially in golf markets. The store's been wildly successful. So yeah, just trying to keep growing in all those channels and yeah, just meet customers where they're at.
Yeah. So I got some thoughts on that, but let's take a quick break and we'll have a quick call to action for our listeners, and we'll jump back and talk some more about Bad Birdie. Hey there, Tycoons. Austin Peterson here, co-host of Tycoons of Small Biz. If you think you have what it takes to be considered a tycoon and you're wondering how you could become a featured guest, please follow and then message us at Tycoons of Small Biz on LinkedIn. We'd love to have a conversation with you to see if it is a mutually good fit, and if so, we'll get you scheduled for an interview. If you're unsure about being a guest on our podcast, but are contemplating selling your business over the next few years and you'd like to know what your business is worth, please also follow us and then message us on LinkedIn for your no-obligation, informal valuation of your business. We look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for listening to the Tycoons of Small Biz podcast. And now, back to today's program. All right, Tycoons, welcome back. We got Austin Peterson, Jason Richardson, and Ryan Weissmuller here on Tycoons of Small Biz, and we're talking about Bad Birdie and what it is that Jason and his team are doing to disrupt the golf industry. And so, right before the break, we were talking a little bit about, where you go next and how do you expand, maybe beyond golf, maybe just beyond polos, maybe, whatever. So it made me think, so I work in an industry that's known for being pretty stodgy as well, right? I mean, Landon and I work in the wealth management industry. Ryan works in finance. There's been an expectation over the years to wear a 3-piece suit and, wingtip shoes and, all those kinds of things. And that's just not who I am. It's not the way that I grew up. I love suits, and I have some really, really nice tailored suits. I wear them on occasion, but when I'm just going to meet with a business owner specifically, which is where we spend our time, that's not the way that they dress. Most of our business owners are casual like you, regardless of what that industry is. And so I find myself trying to break that mold as well. What I'm wearing today, I wear to go meet clients. I've got the multicolored Vans on. I've got golf joggers on. Usually I'll wear like a button-down short sleeve shirt or something that's a little bit different than a polo. But I'm comfortable in that. And so I feel like, you're onto something, because the golf industry is that way, but maybe it's an opportunity to business wear as well that has a little bit more of an edge to it. That's something that I would be on board with. I would wear what you're wearing today on the golf course all day, every day, right? Now, maybe I wouldn't wear those bottoms to go see a client. Totally. But I would definitely wear the top. I wouldn't be concerned about it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was doing what you're doing. I don't think I would wear these bottoms either. I think we just got to call it what it is. And there are certain kind of guidelines and things that are like industry norm or cultural norm. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, I think what our brand can stand for, right? What the Birdie stands for, our logo stands for, what the name stands for is that, you might have a little bit more edge. You might have a little bit more fun in life. It says who you are from a personality standpoint, right? Like even wearing fun colored shoes, I can tell like, okay, the people that wear that kind of stuff, like it's going to say you're probably have a little fun side to you, Yep. And so, yeah, that's where we see a huge opportunity. That's what our customers are also asking for. Like, hey, how do we create, a solid color polo? We're launching solid color polos in 2 weeks because so many customers have asked. We're testing it and we're seeing, hey, is this something that can work, right? That's why we have these cabana sets. People ask. So I think the nice thing about it is we really kind of ask on our customers and lean on them too to be like, hey, what do you guys want? What are the things that, you want to wear on the course, off the course? And I think we are fortunate enough to have a really good community and hopefully build a brand off that and continue to expand. And, it's kind of like, ask permit, like we're getting permission from our customers. And so, yeah, I'm excited too. I think there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. It's a smart way to do it from a retail standpoint. Ask your customers what they want and then provide it to them. You've already got some brand loyalty. Why not just expand on that?
Yeah.
So, Jason, I'm curious in switching gears a little bit, but still on the same vein. You know, you were talking about the trends, and even, you know, an economist, I heard him say that COVID actually, in that disruption, just accelerated a lot of underlying trends that were coming, right? And the world was getting more casual. It was slow, but then all of a sudden with people working from home and, you know, the hybrid office environment, I think today you are seeing, like you were just talking about, people are more comfortable expressing themselves a little bit differently, wearing sneakers to, you know, you don't see the three-piece suit and wingtips in places you used to see it.
Yeah.
But the other side of that, and what I'm curious of your experience, just talk about your experience the last couple of years through all this amazing disruption we've seen, from COVID to supply chain to inflation.
Yeah.
And that's really where your business really got its footing over the last couple of years and really took that next big step. What was that like? Just how did you manage that amazing growth in the midst of all these headwinds that really are crushing a lot of businesses out there, certainly are a struggle for the consumer in spots? What's that been like, and what have you learned from that experience?
Yeah, I think, you know, speaking to COVID, you know, 2 years ago, whenever that was, 2 years ago in March, our sales dropped like 90% the first week, right? I was like, all right, this is it. Jen and I prepared, like, we're going to go out of business, or we're going to have to figure something out. And then we just got really fortunate, right? I think, you know, certain people in business did not benefit from COVID, and we're in a very privileged spot to be like, our business blew up during COVID, and the whole golf industry blew up during COVID. Just given the fact that social distancing, being outside, like, it's like the perfect blend. No one could have planned it. And so I think there's that. You know, I think, you know, COVID shook up the world from like you know, why are we doing what we're doing? Asking that question about, you know, what are you wearing to work? Things like that. And so I think that, yeah, we have a ton of people that, you know, are able to, like, they wear our shirts to work because their work's like, hey, you know what? You can be yourself more so in work. And I think it's just kind of this recalibration of, like, COVID kind of shook out maybe some old policies or things. And I think on the other side of it, in a positive light, it's like, hey, just be more of who you are, right? And I always, you know, it's like, be more of who you are. Remember where you are, though. Like, if you're at work, like, there are certain things that you need to kind of be respectful of. And so I think there is that, like, you know, even telling our own team, it's like, hey, we're at work, but, like, remember where you are, you know? And so there are certain, you know, we're not throwing everything to the wind, but I think what's cool is that more people have personality and they can express themselves.
How did you talk about the flip side of it for a minute? I mean, you've had to have faced some supply chain disruption, or at least the fear of it. I mean, what were some of the challenges you navigated, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so you asked that supply chain. So supply chain it has been, you know, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars last year paying to air freight polos to have in stock on time. So that was a strategic decision to say, hey, you know what? We're going to invest more money and we're going to make less margin, but we're going to have it in market, when a lot of companies chose the opposite and said, hey, we're going to, like, try to save more money, but they actually missed the market opportunity. So we grew a lot by, like, investing in that. Now it's a big pill to swallow when you're like, hey, are we going to air freight polos in for, you know, Black Friday? Well, we had our biggest, you know, Black Friday ever. So it's one of those things. So from a strictly supply chain, you know, to make our polos, like, post-COVID. Pre-COVID, we could make polos in about 90 days. Post-COVID, it went up to 120 days. Why? Because fabric suppliers, labor, it's just a huge shortage, right? So we added 30 days there. We used to be able to say X factory date, polos are dropped off at our port in South Korea to the port of LA, 30 days, 90% of the time, right? Now we have had to build a whole matrix that's like a risk management matrix about, like, what's our average, right? I think it's like 65 days now. So we've doubled it, grown, you know, and there's been ones that have even gone longer. There's been, you know, the ports and this logistics backup's a huge thing. And then, so we went into last year being like, all right, we're going to, like, add 2 months to our supply chain. And then or even during COVID, we had to, like, even add more time. So we're still struggling with that sometimes, you know, like, we have stuff still just coming in right on time, and then it puts pressure on our distribution to, like, really get it out on time. So we're not, like, free and clear of it. We still are, like, you know, ordering stuff, trying to order it more ahead of time, but then, you know, cash flow, well, then we're putting cash out, and cash is just sitting out on the boat or sitting somewhere before we get paid. So working through a lot of trying to figure that out. And so we're still, you know, in a spot where I think we're getting closer to a solution. But yeah, it's a whole new kind of set of challenges we've had to figure out.
You mentioned, that first week you thought potentially this was it, going out of business.
Yeah.
Then you make this decision, when still the world's a pretty crazy place, a lot of uncertainty. You double down when a lot of people won't and say, okay, we're going to make this investment. We're going to make sure we have inventory. We're going to make sure we have things to sell.
Yeah.
You've talked about this tortoise and the hare approach that you've taken.
Yeah.
What was the thought process, though, to make that decision to say, okay, we're going to invest, we're going to do this. We don't know what's happening in the world, because every day something was changing differently.
Yeah.
How did you come to that decision, have confidence in it?
Yeah, so I think I always have, I heard this somewhere where someone was like, the business is only going to grow as much as the market tells you. So it's the same thing, right? Your house is only much as the market will pay. So I always think there's like my mind somehow there's like, okay, well, what does the market need this summer, right? If we're going to make that decision to air freight or figure that out, like I'm obviously sitting there looking at metrics being like, okay, COVID hit in March, right? Let's say January through February, what was our year-over-year growth? Let's say it was 50%. Okay, well, that's off season. I'm going to then put that into like a financial model and be like, okay, let's assume everything is going back. We're seeing early indicator signs. That probably means we're going to go 50 to 50% in our peak season. But I need to see a couple of key indicators, right? Like, you can go play golf now in public, right? That the stay-at-home policy is lifted, but golf is okay. Okay, well, we saw a spike over the 2 weeks after that went up. Okay, that's an indicator. So the risk tolerance, it's funny, like we take a lot of risk, but every single one is calculated. Like there's always a financial model. There's always some sort of downside. There's always a plan B. There's always a plan C. It's the same thing in golf, right? Golfers are going out to play the course, and they know how they're going to strategically play the hole, and there's always a risk in certain shots. Like we wouldn't be taking a risk like unless we thought it was going to work out. Like we never just like hitting a blind shot as an analogy, because I think people think it is, but like there's so many spreadsheets and data analysis and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I know Ryan well enough to know that he loves hearing from a business owner that's using words like key indicators and looking at the financials and making strategic decisions, because that's what he does day in and day out, right? But it wasn't even just that you made a strategic decision. The reality is, because you built the business the way that you have over the years, you had the ability to make those strategic decisions, right? So many businesses are so leveraged that they wouldn't even have had the ability, cash flow wise, to do what you did, right? You took a risk, but it was a calculated risk because you knew that your competitors were not doing it, or either weren't able to do it or weren't willing to do it. And so you knew, gosh, I've got the cash here. I'm going to take a risk, and I think it's going to pay off because my competitors aren't going to do it or aren't able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's huge to be able to do that, right? And you're right. I mean, from a supply chain standpoint, you were able to offset that a little bit by paying the extra for the air freight, and you forgo some profits today for greater profits in the future and greater revenue in the future, right? But it's funny because everybody talks about the supply chain. You go to the small businesses and you can see it, right? You walk in and the shelves are empty, or all kinds of stuff are going on. But when everybody started talking about how much of an impact there was on the supply chain, it was near Black Friday, and I walked into a Costco with my wife and I said, what supply chain issues, right? Because they've got all the cash flow in the world to do whatever they have to end around that supply chain, which is exactly what you did, but you did it on a much smaller scale from a company standpoint, but you still took that risk and had the ability to. I think that's huge.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. Yeah. That was a big, it was like a very stressful week. We had to make the decision, I think, in September for Black Friday of last year. And it was just, we were buying a small house with air freight costs, but it paid off, right? It was like the risk reward. And it was like, I'd rather pay the risk to make sure we have it versus, the downside of it is like, oh, well, everything came in on time. We could have saved a couple $100,000, but it's like just that, it's just mitigating the risk a little bit. So,
yeah. So I got to ask this question. You moved from LA to here. Mm-hmm. Was it purely a personal decision because of your family being here and wanting to be back here, or was there a business reason for being back here as well?
Yeah, I'd actually say it was, to be totally honest, when I left, and I left Phoenix to go to LA, I never had the intention of coming back to Arizona. I think for me, I always wanted to go try something new and explore. I honestly never thought I'd move back here, and there was no desire to move back. It's close by. I could see my family whenever needed. It's a short drive or flight. But as we started to scale and kind of made this decision to grow, looking at, I want to pay my employees fairly. Like I want to actually start paying myself. Money's going to go a lot further in Arizona. And then even from a tax standpoint, right? I think our taxes at, income tax in the state is 4.5 for businesses or something. And it's like, now it's like 10 or 11 in California. So at scale, as we grow, that's a lot of money. So how can I better, leverage the company and actually not leverage, but how we grow it. And so, yeah, Arizona's been great. I think we live in a completely different area that I ever grew up in. And, the benefit of that is been able to see my parents more, see friends more, things that it was a business decision, but now it's reaped more rewards beyond that.
Yeah. So I was at a dinner last night and we were talking about exactly this, right? And so I have a guy sitting right next to me who lives in the Bay Area, and he was talking about all of his business owner clients and otherwise that were leaving California. And mainly it's around taxes and really the way that COVID was handled in the state of California. People were they're leaving in droves. They're coming here, they're going to Denver, they're going to Salt Lake City, they're going to Dallas and Austin, Texas. And I feel like there's one that I'm missing, but they're going to all of those states because they're, from a tax standpoint and regulation standpoint as well, they're more business friendly, and they're welcoming these businesses in. And then just the fact that your dollar goes further, right? I mean, we've got, for you personally, but also for your employees, right? I mean, you can pay an employee, let's just pick a number. Say you're paying somebody $50,000 or $60,000 a year.
Yeah. That's
a decent salary here.
Yeah.
In California,
you're paying 70, 80.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just, and they're still just barely scraping by, or they're driving an hour and a half each direction to be able to handle it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, it's a lot of businesses are moving. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. I love visiting California, but I wouldn't move back personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Ryan?
So I can't believe we haven't talked about this yet, but the designs themselves.
Yeah.
How does that? I mean, you've got some very unique looks. I mean, you're pushing the boundaries on certain elements. I mean, how does that come about? What's the process?
Yeah.
How do you guys, filter through what's because you're doing those drops you mentioned? How do you decide what you're dropping when and what you're putting out there into the market?
It's a great question. I've had to grow up a lot in the last year on this, and I'm still learning a ton. So, when it started out, it's like, hey, what does Jason want? What am I just going to make and think that works? And I mean, that worked for the first 3.5 years, to be totally honest. And I think I've always been someone who pays attention to fashion and understands like what's trending. I could remember when I was in, fourth grade, I could tell you every single kid, like what shoes they wore, what brands I've been very aware of like brands in fashion my whole life, not intentionally. And, I never had those brands growing up, but I always was aware of it. And so I think that kind of helped grow the business in a sense, right? Like understanding that. So a lot of it comes down to, early stages, it was like every single print, working with a graphic designer to come in. I don't actually know how to use like Photoshop or Illustrator to that extent. So it's like custom. And then as we grow, right? Oh, there's actually resources. There's actually a huge industry around people selling prints or making prints for companies like ours. So we expanding, we start working with different studios and making stuff. Well, that's great to a certain point. To then, hey, we launched a shirt with bananas on it and it flopped and it didn't sell through, right? Like, or it didn't flop, but it just didn't sell through in the same. And then wait, my gut instinct isn't necessarily aligned with the market anymore. So like, okay, how do we actually think about that? How do we actually plan accordingly? So now we're in stage one of even, kind of building out a proper product team. Hired a leader to lead all of our product last summer, and he's come in and we're hiring, he'll probably have 5 people under him by the end of the year. And like, there's a whole process of, trend forecasting, merchandising, and figuring out what's going to work. So prints, right? Like, right now, every print that goes out, someone it's being surveyed or it's being shared with like a core group of customers who buy from us regularly. We're also looking at trend reports. There's things that it's just like, we're a bigger company, and so when we talk about risk mitigation, like we have to offset it by at least doing a customer survey or at least getting a second opinion. Like it used to just be like I had my 5 friends that I thought had good style and I just shared it with them. But then when you have that not selling through and you're like, okay, now I have to like figure out how to sell 1,000 units that are selling a little bit slower. That's a problem that we're trying to avoid. So yeah, just growing up and learning and building systems in place. And I mean, the nice thing is like we are, not the first apparel company. So plenty of companies do this, and we're just hiring people to know how to, actually merchandise and know how to plan accordingly.
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur is to start to let go of certain things that you did yourself from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the big part of growing a larger business, right? You said you just hit 8 figures. So it's a larger small business in our country, right? But taking off this hat and then taking off the next hat and hiring somebody and trusting that they'll do it the way that you want them to, or just as well or better, is really hard as an entrepreneur to step away and to allow that, right?
It's super hard. Yeah. I'm going through a whole phase of that. I'm reading books. I'm trying to meet as many other entrepreneurs as possible. I have an exec coach that's kind of helping me go through that and just trying to learn more, because it's a different game, right? Chief everything officer is not something you want to be, and that's not how you scale a business. And so I have to actually delegate and be a leader. We've gotten to where we're at because I can put my head down and be a really good operator, but actually to set a vision and rally people around it's a completely different game that I'm honestly still learning how to do.
Yeah. It's hard to do, but it's critical, right? I mean, if you look just purely from a business valuation standpoint, and assuming at some point you want to, monetize this business for you personally, whatever that looks like, a huge issue or a huge driver, I guess, for value is owner dependency, right? And so as an owner, even though you're, filling an executive role, you're the owner. If the business can run completely without you, it's worth way more than it is if you're having to work in it day in and day out. You're providing all the direction, everything.
Yep.
So just something to keep in mind, of course, but it's hard to do. It's a really hard transition, and you're right in the thick of it now where you're trying to take that next big leap.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, there's a lot of people that have spoken that wisdom to me. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm aware and trying to learn.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so the branding side, and I think we'll wrap up here, but the branding side of this makes me think of somebody that we had on very early on in our podcast that has like a clothing boutique in Long Beach, California. Okay. Right. And her demographic, and much like yours, because you're going to continue to get older, and I know you've got some 70-year-old guys that are wearing the stuff too, but if your main demographic, like you mentioned at the beginning, is 25 to 40, you're almost to 40 now, being 34 years old. And so her transition has had to be, I no longer speak to that demographic. She's done a bunch building her brand from a video marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
And now, because she's 40 years old or close to it, somewhere around there, 20-something-year-old girls who are buying fashion don't want to see a video of a 40-year-old woman wearing the clothes that they should be buying, right?
Yeah.
And so have you guys done anything from a marketing standpoint, or do you have plans from a marketing standpoint to feature different aged people wearing them, doing certain things? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, something I'm very aware of. And I think there's something about, just from a leadership perspective, hiring kind of young guns. I love the idea of people who are, hiring people who are in their late 20s or early 30s who can grow up and still be core to the brand. I think if we start hiring too senior above that, particularly around product and, marketing, I think there can be a disconnect sometime. So yeah, we have like our team now is like strategically, they have a lot of shelf life left, if I would say that. And even if they grew beyond 40, right, like there's still things you can do to be aware and understand that. And a lot of companies do that. I think from a marketing standpoint, I mean, we have on our website now, we have a bestseller slide, and it shows, it's like four young guys, and then there's like there's like a grandpa with them or something like that. So we still show that to be inclusive. It also is fun, right? Like it shows something like, why is this old guy wearing a shirt? Well, this is a cool brand, We also show young, like we have our kids collection dropping out. We do it around Father's Day every year. That's coming out too. So we show it. But I think it's really just a matter of like, how are we, how do our visuals, how does the creative, right? The visuals, the design, everything stay relevant to that target demographic. And so whether you're a 70-year-old making, and you know how to write copy for a 30-year-old, that's great, And so, yeah, there's kind of double-edged sword to that, that's ultimately where being a creative, if they can actually, it's like being an actor, right? If you can only act in one way, then you're not really truly an actor. But if you can be creative, you can actually take your skills and put them in different audiences and speak to people versus being, I can only market to myself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's funny because there are those actors where you feel like they're in a different role on a different show, but their persona is exactly the same in all the different shows.
100%. Yeah. And that's, I was in production before this. I worked a lot with actors and casting and all that. And it's like, you can tell when someone's like actually has the ability to like work in and bring a different character to life. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I've appreciated the conversation. Anything you want to close with, Ryan?
No, I think a lot of great stuff. I love a few of those words of wisdoms of the calculated risks, I think is a really good thing to think about. And seeing the tail end of success. I wrote that down. I really like that one because I think that is very true. It's an easy paradigm to get in where you see the tail end, but not everything along the journey. And exciting journey ahead for you. So thanks so much for the time today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, being an entrepreneur is hard. So just leave us with website address or whatever you'd like those would.
Yeah. So our website is badbirdiegolf.com. We're on all social at badbirdiegolf. And if you're in Scottsdale, come check out our retail store in Kierland, and also check us out in your local golf shop.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Jason.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, proudly hosted by Austin Peterson and Landon Mance. Austin and Landon are comprehensive financial planning professionals specializing in financial, estate, and succession planning for small business owners. Austin and Landon have offices in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada, and represent clients in 14 states throughout the country. Join Austin, Landon, and the featured Tycoons live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. right here on Business Radio X and your favorite podcast platform.